We're going to start with our special meeting work session today. I'm going to ask Kellen to come up first to fill us in, if you would, please.
Okay. Would you mind if Rick Smith from Municipal Finance comes up,
Okay.
actually? He had something, yeah, and then Jeff will come up.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Smith. My name is Rick Smith, President of Municipal Finance Services in Edmond. This isn't my first rodeo in Blackwell. As most of you know, we've had the pleasure of working with the city, actually since about 1994, on a lot of your capital project financings and sales tax elections and other things that have benefited the city. We are glad to be here tonight. It's been a while since we've had the pleasure and opportunity to address you. John Wolf, who is Vice President of our firm, will actually be kind of going over some information that we think would be beneficial to the council as you address your capital project needs. And I just wanted to let you know that we are pleased to be here. And it may be my last time, I don't know. But, that's why John's here. I'm getting kind of old, long in the tooth, as they say. But in any event, thank you very much for this opportunity.
Jeff, you might need to adjust that microphone. I know you're soft-spoken. And taller.
Well, thanks, Rick, for opening up. My name is Jeff Cowan with Cowan Group Engineering. Mayor, Council, thank you for allowing us to come in this evening and share a little bit. I'm going to do the opening remarks, and then I'm going to have John, that works with Rick, share a little bit more about the financing. Well, a little over a couple weeks ago, we gave those workshops. We missed a couple of you there, but hopefully you got filled in a little bit about the water capital improvement plan that you approved our contract a little over a year ago to look at the water systems, and we looked at the water treatment, we looked at the existing distribution system, and came up with a recommendation. And then you were so kind to let us do the workshop meetings with you and share a little bit more of kind of hitting the treetops, diving into some details. And you saw the price tag, and I really don't need to go into that. You already saw that. And so what we want to do, without further ado, we want to let John have the floor to share some thoughts on the financial picture as we move forward. And then following John, we'll have Phil, who's our technical expert in water treatments and water distribution, Sherry, if you have any technical questions. So without that, I'll have John step up.
Good evening, everyone. Nice to see some of you are new, and some were here the last time we were up here. My discussion tonight addresses what was stated a few minutes ago, that you guys were presented with a big price tag for your water system improvements that are necessary in order for you guys to address a lot of significant issues within your water system. And I know, I thought about this on my way up here, that it's a huge price tag, and then you have to figure out how you're going to pay for that. And when you bring in the financial people, unfortunately, we can't create any magic with this. It's going to cost you your resources that you have that currently fund all your various services throughout the city. Our job is to try to put together a structure that's the least onerous on your citizens, on your utility customers, on those that pay sales tax in this community, while at the same time taking on a list of projects that are necessary for the community, but also blend in with what other projects and priorities you have for the city. So as we focus on this, we don't leave behind that you also provide other utility services. You need to address those systems, and you also certainly provide other services, public safety, so forth. And so when we look at methods of financing, we take that into consideration But going forward over the days and weeks to come, what we're gonna look at is a combination of different options on how you afford paying for some, half, a majority of the projects as you deem necessary as a governing body and what you want to move forward with. And so some of the key elements associated with us looking at this is to look at what source of revenues do you have now that fund your capital needs, and where are those dollars going at this present time. I have a handout that I can pass out, but I don't want you so much to be looking at a spreadsheet that everyone's trying to point to the right number. I think the numbers are fairly easy in looking at the community in that you have approximately 3,000 water customers. And so when you're looking at millions and millions of dollars to address the needs, that's a small base, a small customer base to spread that over. You also have sales tax that you have earmarked for capital needs. It's a 1.5 cent sales tax that expires in September 2030. So you're still about 9.5 years away from that expiration. To fund these type of improvements, you're looking at, on the majority, assets that have a life that are up to 40 years. A lot of this is line replacement that you've been presented with. Some of this is shorter term assets, although you want various communities, a lot of communities throughout the state, their mechanical treatment plants are typically 20, 25-year life assets, although a lot of communities stretch those out to as far as they possibly can because of the cost. And so we're gonna look at, as part of our responsibility as your financial advisor, is what's the most economical. And what's, in essence, what's the lowest interest rate? What program can you avail yourself of those dollars and close in tandem with when these projects would be bid out? We're also going to look at how you currently fund your existing debt and look at those resources, because you also receive an allocation from the Blackwell Public Trust. And so what we're going to essentially do is put together a very basic spreadsheet, but we set it up as a model where it's interactive to where you can determine, based on input from each one of you, where do we want to place the burden in order to pay for this? How do we spread that burden out? And it's a tough choice, because you have a sales tax that expires in 9.5 years that is being used to pay on all your existing debt that you have of the authority. You have 4 separate loans. Those loans fall off periodically starting in 26, and then the final loan, I believe, pays off in 29 or 2030. And so as that debt falls off, we're going to look at, as one of the options, is to what we call backfill. If you pay off a debt that's costing you $500,000 a year, then we're taking that $500,000 a year and applying it to these new water projects. And we continue to do that as you get closer to the payoff of all your debt, till you get closer to the expiration of that sales tax. That sales tax, that 1.5% that is specifically for capital, is bringing it, last year it brought in about $870,000. It may bring in today about $900,000. But when we're talking about millions of dollars that you can't fund cash basis, in essence, you have to get those projects done now, then you have to borrow, you have to pay interest. And one of our suggestions will be that for a water project, you avail yourselves of the Oklahoma Water Resources Board, which you have in the past. It's a low interest rate program. They have 2 programs that you can use for water projects. One program is federally subsidized. It does require that if there are any environmental issues, if you're breaking new ground, in essence, there's some more specifics than that, then you have to have an environmental review done. There are some of these projects, as far as their components, that will disturb new ground. Some will be placed in your existing easements. We're gonna stack up and look at one program versus the other from the Water Resources Board to get you the lowest interest rate. This program or set of programs that I'm speaking of is the first thing that we check off. You have the option to go out and issue your own debt and not borrow from a state agency. You have the option to potentially look to go to the local banks or state banks for financing, but these are 30-year assets. They need long-term loans, and you have a tremendous program with the Oklahoma Water Resources Board in that it's a AAA program. It's revered throughout the United States, so it's a great program for you to borrow from. But the fact that you get this project or set of projects met by low interest is job number one. Two is to follow up and over the weeks to come and to sit down with you and to provide you with information that says, here's how we look at this as an option to pay for through increasing X, Y, or Z, or extending X, Y, or Z. If you extend the sales tax, because millions of dollars that you may borrow to do even the initial phases of what are necessary are going to cost you hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars a year in order to advance fund those projects now. Now, the positive thing that of all of this, it's never positive to have to take on debt, but you're in the lowest interest rate period. If you look at a 10-year window, in the last 10 years, you're at the lowest ever in the history of the United States as far as borrowing funding. And so that doesn't ease the blow, it doesn't take it away, but what we're going to do is prepare a model for you that takes into account not just the water projects, but also any other projects that city management presents to us, that we interact with your CFO, and we're going to look at what fits best for you and then come to you and actually lay this out in front of you as far as what we believe is a good starting option, but then interact with you and determine what makes the most sense for the community. We have that model put together. We just need to determine what your obligations would be and when you would take those obligations on and what those dollar amounts would be. We are prepared to come back to you immediately and to sit down and to have work sessions and to go over this is how you could possibly address these projects. It may sound vague of what I'm speaking of tonight, but any numbers that I would show you tonight is still dependent on fine-tuning where you would be as far as the projects. But I at least wanted to state that, as Rick Smith had mentioned, we've had the privilege of serving as your financial advisor for 30 years approximately. We represent a lot of cities throughout the state, and we solve these problems every day. They're not easy solutions if you're paying the bill, but we want to be able to hopefully bring that service to you and answer any questions that you have tonight. I'd be glad to take any questions that anyone has, and we can get as deep or as shallow as you want to get into the financing side. So be glad to answer any questions anyone has.
It might be a good idea to have Frank come up and talk a little bit about kind of our initial projects and the funding for it, so that we can, I guess Corey will be running out in a minute now, fire trucks, but Frank, one of the questions that we always have is, how are we gonna fund the engineering? And as you've noted in our agenda items, each one of the capital expense projects, we've noted a place where we actually do have funding that we can support this. So I wanted to take a few minutes, since we're talking about the funding, and let Frank address some of these issues. They really start with item F. under business, and they go from the ambulance subscription forward through these projects. So Frank, as we've worked on these things, I wanted you to weigh in and let the council know your perspective on this.
Sure. Going back to the beginning of the budget year, we historically said, look, we've got hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars that are awaiting to be spent in dedicated funds that can only be spent for those certain things, whether they be from allocation of sales tax, whether they be from the BPT contributions. We've historically let the council set the direction, or management set the direction of where this money goes. And so throughout this year, we've been amending the budget anywhere from 1 to 8 or 9 times. I think you have an amendment on tonight's budget, where we select certain things. We say, okay, we're going to fund this, and here's how it's going to come. So this round of funding obviously is a lot. But all of the funding that we're doing for either preliminary engineering reports or design, whether it be for item F or item L or item K, is all coming from existing cash that's sitting there waiting for you guys to appropriate if this is the direction that the city wishes to go from a priority basis. So I know we've talked historically about having a plan, or we're developing a plan of where we're going to go in the future and how we're going to get there. If this becomes the priority, or if this is the set priority, then this is how we're going to fund certain things. And so very quickly with item F, which was the discussion related to us offering an ambulance subscription, basically by not charging the citizens. We're recommending that rather than the general fund lose that money in the operation of that service, that we will simply go to the BPT community enhancement allocation, and we will reimburse the city for the cost of those services. In other words, providing the funding to the general fund for the ambulance, but not going from the citizens, instead using the interest money that has been allocated into the community enhancement allocation. So that's item F. Item G, from my understanding, is part of the hospital deal. The mechanics of the hospital funding, although I wasn't involved in it, looking from the outside in, was a very complicated group of financing and new market tax credits. And basically what the idea of my understanding is that within that package, not only were we going to get this hospital, but we were also going to get street improvements related to a $2.3 million, roughly $2.3 million project. It looks like that project is now estimated at $2.4 million, a little bit more expensive than what the 2.3 was. But again, we've got plenty of different places we can take that difference. The easiest way to kind of think about us getting that package is that we're going to spend roughly $100,000 and get a $2.4 million improvement, where the plan was initially don't spend anything and get a $2.3 million improvement. But now, because of whatever costs have gone up and other overruns or other things, it looks like it's now 2.4. The 100,000 is not the issue. We've got plenty of money and plenty of locations that we can take that 100,000 from as it relates to streets. Item H is the funding of an entire project for the proposed plans for the Ferguson Street widening and the sidewalk project for the elementary school. It's my understanding that the entire project cost is about $800,000, and we went to the BPT Street Allocation Fund, which has about $660,000 projected to be left over at June 30 of 21 if we hold things constant as they are now. So we could use that $660,000 and another $120,000 from our 99 sales tax capital improvement fund that's kind of sitting there with about $674,000 tied up in a CD that matures in May. So the plan would be, if we're going to use that money or a portion of it, that we just won't reinvest that CD, and we will instead use that money to cover the part of this that the BPT street allocation does not. Item I is the engineering proposal for the scope and fee for design services for the new public safety training center. Again, another engineering project that the total cost for your approval would be considered to be $335,000, almost $336,000. Again, if we cash in the $674,000 CD of the 99 capital improvement sales tax, we're going to use 120 of it on the street project that we just talked about. We'll take the difference of the 335 and take it also. That'll still leave us with maybe $140,000, $150,000 in that we could either use for something else or reinvest at that point. Items K and L are water related. That is what the subject of most of what has been talked about tonight. Item K being the report for the design, and again, I'm not using the right words, engineering reports and engineering for both the water treatment plant and the primary water lines or priority water line project. The cost of those two things are roughly about $1 million together. So about $450,000 on item K and about $500,000 on item L. So where is there money that we can use that existing cash right now? Well, the BPT Water Allocation Fund has about $450,000 of money that is there for water that we could then use out of the BPT Allocation Fund. And then we would also take an additional $240 of it to fund item L, and then use our capital improvement allocation, which has 44% based on what we talked about at the last meeting, where we would draw another $260,000 out of that. Now, so basically, to make a long story short, we have cash waiting to be used that can only be used for stuff like this. All we've waited on up until this point was a priority list. Now that a priority list has been provided to us, I'm telling you basically where you can take the money from. And so that money is there. It does set you down a path that is, once you start going down this path, it's tough to get off of it. Because now by setting the priority and spending a couple of $1 million on water lines and street improvements, you have basically set yourself into a future commitment to follow through with that. It wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to do all of the engineering and design and engineering reports for water lines and water improvements and then decide, well, now I don't want to do it. I mean, it's just a waste of money if you decide that. But the priorities are now set. Water appears to be the priority. Streets are a priority also. Health has been a priority. The ambulance services, the hospital has always been a priority. So you guys have been basically taking aim at the bulk of the priorities as you've seen them, and then designing something to fund them. So this is the same issue. Drawbacks are that we will be draining a lot of those BPT allocations, you know, the street allocation and the water allocation at June 30. If we spend this money, they'll have nothing in that allocation. But the good news is that starting on July 1, they will begin building back up again. And I think last meeting, don't hold me to this, but I thought the trusts were about 55 million together, roughly, earning somewhere around 8 or 9% on average since its existence. We get 1/4 of 1%, which is another fancy way of saying we get about 3% a year. The hospital gets 1/6 of 1%, which is another fancy way of saying they get 2% a year. So we're drawing 5% together, 3 for the city, 2 for the hospital, out of the BPT. At 55 million, that's about $1,650,000 roughly. So in other words, that $1,650,000 regenerates itself every year as long as that trust value stays in the neighborhood of 55 million. Obviously, if it goes up to 60 million or it goes up to some other number, we'll get that excess also. But right now, it's generating about $1,650,000 at roughly 55 million. So the reason we've got this cash is that we have accumulated over the years more money from that BPT allocation than what we've dedicated or spent the money for. That's why you have nearly a little over $3 million that's waiting there to be spent out of that BPT allocation money. And now it appears that the priorities are being lined up for that money to be used. So I think, is that kind of what you want me to cover without getting too terribly wordy? So we have existing cash. We don't have to borrow money to do this phase, to do these phases, but you set yourself on a path, as John had just mentioned earlier, that in order to finish the job, you will have to borrow money. And then it becomes a factor of, okay, how am I going to service that debt? Am I going to raise utility rates? Am I going to rededicate sales tax? Am I going to extend the $0.015 sales tax that's already set to expire in 2030? Again, that's the packages that they're going to come to you with and show you all the different options that will impact both sales tax and utilities. But for right now, we're funding the initial stuff out of cash and out of the money that we've been sitting on for all this time. Questions?
I guess not so much a question.
Sure.
It's, and this is to everyone out there, you're making a presentation to a council that may not be sitting here next week. Okay, and so I'm in favor, and we have been for a long time, knowing we need water lines, knowing we need to either rebuild or replace the water plant. As far as I'm concerned, this council that presently seated should not be making any decision and committing the city or the next council to what's already been stated, long-term debt, long-term commitments. So, and these different projects, Frank, you said, well, we got enough money to cover it all. There's close to $5 million here proposed that we commit to tonight, simply to explore what would the cost be for all these different projects. And the council has not established any particular project, okay? So, say that we would like to, sure, but we have not. So, I, for one, actually, I believe we're a little premature. I think you should come back to the next meeting or the meeting after. You could be sitting and seeing quite a different council sitting here, maybe with some different ideas, but they would need to be educated anyway and informed as to what's going on. So,
I would like to point out that item G, the proposed plans for 13th Street and Ferguson Avenue reconstruction, that $2.3 million has been set aside in the hospital financing, in the new market tax credits, and so that is already paid for. So you can subtract almost $2.5 million from your total of $5 million. And so we've already got that taken care of. Tonight, we will actually be proposing the plans on that for you to actually see what they are. There's quite a bit of engineering that goes along with that, and we've got representatives from Guernsey Engineering who are here to explain that. There is quite a bit that has gone on in the last year at least. And what you're seeing tonight in these projects and the summaries of these projects are many, many months of planning. And like I've said many times before, you never know when these projects are going to culminate, and then it will be time to bring it before the council. And, I will refer back to our city charter that does say that any ordinance, it's recommended that it be brought before the people at least twice in a council meeting. You don't always expect that the very first time that you introduce the subject that it will be approved, but you still have to introduce the subject so that you can have discussion of the subject matter. And as a council, I know that my job is to inform you and then to bring the experts here so that they can inform you even more thoroughly on what these projects are. And tonight, this room is filled with not only the public, but also with the experts for this. And I suspect that there are others here tonight who may sit in these seats in the next 2 weeks. and that they will be informed for this public discussion that we're having in the work session tonight. So, and I would like to remind everybody that, Phil Briggs and also Jeff Cowan were here 2 weeks ago and did a council workshop with individual council members for the most part, went through these projects. These projects were named prior to, and at that meeting, subsequent to it, we were sent proposals, which are now part of what you see tonight. And I would like to ask Phil or either Jeff to come up and explain what Priority Water Lines project actually means, because I think it's significant for you to understand that we're not talking about something that is a brand new subject here that we've never dealt with before. Water lines and good water for our people has been a priority for many, many years. MKEC was here prior to Cowan being here. Cowan has now built on what they were able to get from MKEC to make a presentation to the council tonight. The priority water lines are significant for fire suppression and for our fire hydrants. And Phil, you're the engineer here, so I'll let you take over from here, but just explain what this plan really is.
Okay. What we've got on these proposals was just kind of following up on what Jeff had covered in with his PowerPoint presentation. The priority water lines, what that's for is to take the water from the water plant and take a dedicated line up to your water tower so that everything is fed from the water tower. Because right now, everything in the lower zone from 13th Street east, your pumps are on 24/7. They have to be. There's no other way to keep water in that area. What I'm proposing by putting this line to that location and feed back, it lets the pump shut off. It saves you money on your electric bill and everything else. Let your pump relax and not burn it up or wear it out as quick. That's the first step we're trying to do. Right now, there's a booster pump at Ferguson and 13th that pressures the upper zone, and basically you've got a zone that's split right down 13th Street. Everything to the west is your upper zone. Everything to the east is the lower zone. So we're trying to keep that like that, because if we just went to one zone, we'd end up with probably 20 psi higher on the east side, and a lot of people's plumbing probably wouldn't be able to handle that, and we don't want to change that. So we're going to keep that like it is. We're looking at on this first set of water lines after this priority line we're talking about is to use part of what we've already done on the CDBG project that we weren't able to get the grant to do that project. We've already done the plans on that, so the engineering has already been done. We're just going to take that and package it so we can do make use of that. And basically that's going from 13th Street to 4th, and from, I believe it's McKinney down to College. That's that first piece. Other than that's the second project that's listed in that proposal. And then the other one is going from College down to Ferguson and over to 4th, and there's actually goes a little farther past over to 3rd, so that we can get a good loop. And we're trying to get a good loop down 13th, Ferguson, and back up and around, so that we've got good fire protection at the hospital. It's going to dovetail well in with the proposed road work, because we're going to need to replace those water lines along Ferguson and 13th, and we need to get that done before we, get the roads put in. And then normally you get your utilities relocated before you do your road work anyway. And so that's part of what we're trying to do on this, and that's what we're doing on the priority water lines is those three projects. Part of that part of work, we're putting in new pressure regulating stations The ones you have right now, they're in a vault below ground. That's gonna require 2 people because it's a confined entry, so you've gotta have 2 people there if you wanna go in there and check that. What I'm proposing is to have this where the pipes come up and over and back down so that the regulating station is where one person can walk in there and make adjustments or check it out without having to, you know, put somebody in potential danger. So, you know, these are definitely upgrades to what you have. And because we are going to be using this, you know, this 2-zone system and actually put it in place where it does operate, we need to be able to, you know, have quick access to it, check it, and so forth. So that's also in this package. And I think I covered everything on the water. The engineering report, what we're doing on that, I think in the agenda it says design, but what it is, it's an engineering report for a new water plant. And DEQ requires that. Basically cradle to grave treatment. You know, if we get the water out of the river, we treat it. There's always some kind of waste, and we've got to be able to handle that and show them what we're going to do with it long term, because we don't want to build a new plant and have another problem because all of a sudden we've got something else, a byproduct we created. So we have to address everything in that. We've got 3 different treatment options proposed in that. They'll be conventional plus membrane or a combination thereof. Whatever makes most sense and what would work better for your community and with the type of water we've got to treat. Also in that proposal on the engineering report is an environmental information document. That's required for what we're doing, so that's also included in this report. And then we've also added in that to look at 3 different options for alternate source water, groundwater. So what we're proposing to do is look at 3 different locations so that, you know, we can try to figure out where we might be able to get, we're looking at trying to get 1 million gallons a day out of it. Right now, your average is 2 million gallons a day. So if we can get groundwater, blend it with your surface water, it's going to cut all your contamination that you have in your surface water by half, if we're able to do that. And that's part of what we're looking at in this report, and that's included in there. Plus going around and looking at some other plants and seeing what works and doesn't work at those locations. And that's why we're going to, you know, have Jim come along with us and try to see what, and talk to the operators, talk to the actual operations of the thing, and not, you know, people that have to deal with, you know, running the plant every day, and make sure we address things like that so that we can get the best plant for you, most efficient plant, easier to operate. Try to keep your overhead down with, you know, maintenance and personnel that you're going to need to operate.
I think, hey Phil, what we had talked about, remember the letter from DEQ that we got that was the 9 or 10 page letter?
Right.
And they were recommending that the beginning problem, the beginning point was replacing water lines.
Yes.
That was their recommendation. And so we based what we were doing on that letter that came to the council, and, you know, we discussed it in a council meeting, and their recommendation was that we do something about the water lines first, and then, you know, look, and that was the most important thing, was getting the new lines put in. Not that the plant was any less significant, but just we needed to start working on replacing those lines. And so that's really what we took on first.
Right.
Was that issue, and then later worked in the plant, because we are dealing with a plant that was built in, what, 1927?
Yes.
90 years old?
Yes, it was built in 1927 for the power plant, and it wasn't originally intended for drinking water. I mean, it was meant for the, you know, the steam and everything else they were using in the power plant. I will say this, that that plant, it was built, it was very robust. I mean, it was a first-class plant when they built it back in the day. I mean, which is a testament to why it's lasted 90 years. But, you know, that can's been kicked down the road a long time, and most of these plants we do, they're 30 or 40-year plants, and then you're looking at a major rehab or replacement. And that's why the funding on them is only for 30 or 40 years, because they figure you don't want to pay for something for 60 years, that in 30 years you're going to have to build a new one. So that's why they're financing them in these 30 and 40-year periods like that. You know, I can say the same thing about your water system, the distribution. Most of these towns that I've worked in, and they're all in the same shape. You know, the lines are old, they're getting clogged up. A lot of them, there's you know, probably about an inch worth of line left that water can actually pass through. What I will say about your system was when they built it, they built a backbone of 8-inch lines and then put 4-inch lines in between. And I haven't seen that before. You know, most of them, they put the bare minimum in, 4 inches everywhere. Today, you can't put a fire hydrant on a 4-inch line. They won't allow that, not with a pumper connection. And so everything's got to be minimum 6-inch line. The old cast iron lines are just notorious for stuff building up inside of them. They just do. There's bacteria that actually heat the iron and will build up and plug that, you know, start to cause what they call tuberculosis in the line. And so, you know, and you've gotten a lot of use out of those lines, but, you know, we're looking at PVC lines. They're not going to be as susceptible to that kind of degradation, not as quickly anyway. And the other thing I did want to point out is, I don't know if you recall in the presentation, we had a map of the ice storm repairs and the dots that were on that map. There was 20 of them that we showed on that map, and there was actually about 40. We just plotted the first 20 that we had, that we were given. We didn't put the other 20 on there. But everything that was damaged was from 13th Street East. It was in the lower pressure zone. And I don't think the point was made, maybe as clearly, but what is happening is because the pump is in that lower zone, and it's what's keeping everything pressured. When that pump has to supply water to the booster pump for the Ferguson station, it's pulling a substantial amount of water out of that, so your pressure drops. Okay, when it cuts off, it comes back up, and what you're doing, it causes a water hammer in your system. And if you look at where those red dots were, a lot of them were on the extremities of the system where that water hammer is going to hit and come back, and it's going to collide with another wave coming through there, and so that's why you see all those breaks in that lower side. That's one of the main reasons why I wanted to make sure we took that water and went to the tank and let it feed off the tank. Then we wouldn't have any surges. It goes based on that water elevation, and that pressure is constant. You're not having a pump constantly go up and down and try to satisfy your demand. So it's going to alleviate, just doing the first part of this package is going to alleviate a lot of damage you're getting right now, a lot of repairs you're having to make. So it will buy you a little more time and maybe free up your guys from having to do a lot of repairs in that lower zone, because it's just going to keep happening. And with the ice storm, I think that kind of exacerbated some of your systems. I think there's probably other leaks. I'm sure there's other leaks that you haven't found yet because of that, but they will surface. And you know, it's not going to get better. The lines are just going to constantly be getting worse, and that is something that, you know, we do need to address. And water lines are, you know, I mean, if you don't have water lines, you're not going to get water to the customers. One of the reasons besides the fact that we use the CDBG areas to try to make use of those, that since you've already paid for the design on It also helps us sort of isolate the north and the south and the east. We can actually, we'll have new lines and new valves that we can kind of cut off those areas. Right now, I don't know how many valves you have that work. With all that built up in your line, you try to close a valve and it's trying to close on that, and that's why that stuff just doesn't work, and that's why you have to exercise them or eventually replace them like we're talking about. But your system's lasted longer than most, and I would say the reason it's lasted as long as it has and you still have things working is they did use an 8-inch loop in the original design, and I think that was whoever came up with that back in the 1920, 27. They really did a good job for you, but that it's past its usefulness at this point.
Yes, sir. Again, I think all these projects have a place and a time. Okay? I believe the last report the council got from ODQ was our water plant is producing good water. Okay? It's old. Yeah, we've known that for a long time. So in sometime or another it needs updated or replaced. But the presentation was just kind of, as far as I'm concerned, it was a general overall saying, we need water lines, we need a sewer, we need a new plant. I think we already do that. Now, what's being presented though, I would feel much better, what you was presenting there about we're needing valves, bring us a project. You said 13th Street, those water lines, that needs to be taken care of before the street is, correct?
It should be, yes.
So instead of us having to commit to a $32 million project, which I understand was to be, that over a number of years, if we can't afford that, obviously, bring us something that, tell us what would it cost to redo all the water lines necessary to, so that 13th Street could be done.
It's a priority.
We do have that. We already have that. We've done that internally.
Well, maybe
And-
you
and
have,
these-
but the
no,
council
sir.
hasn't.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, part of our annual budget that is appropriated for departments is for maintenance, is for repair, is for new lines. And that has been done and is being done, and DEQ permitting has been, Phil, you've worked with us on that. So there are small projects that are done. This is a larger comprehensive project that we can't get away from. We can't piecemeal this together, which is pretty much what has been done for I don't know how many years now, but it's been piecemealed together. And, there were plenty of engineers here 10 years ago that have been working on a plan that passed along information to Cowan, and now we're looking at a comprehensive plan because we do have issues, and Corey Hannebrink, our fire chief, can speak to this much better than I can, but we do have areas of our community that we don't have proper fire hydrant pressure for.
We heard
And that's
that
what,
from Corey.
yes, well, I know that you have, but this is a project now that we're looking at a comprehensive plan, and it's exactly what we need to do to move us forward. And tonight, these costs are for engineering reports. Then these are what we have to get in place so that we can get loans, so that we can get funding, so that we can get grants. But it would be the same as us going into the bank and saying, well, I'd like to buy a car. And then they say, well, what car would you like? Well, I don't really know. Well, what's the range that you'd like to pay for it? Well, I really don't know, but I want you to tell me how much it would cost for me to do this. That is what we're dealing with now. If we don't do some engineering and get these reports ready, then how are we ever going to move forward as a community? It takes a plan, and you've said that many, many times. Where is the plan? What is the plan? here is the plan that you've asked for. It is the beginning point, and it says, here's what we're looking at doing. Yes, it is a commitment, because $500,000 on this project for engineering, $500,000 on that project for engineering is a commitment, but that is a commitment to this community for better water. I don't think anybody would argue with the need for better water in our community.
Well, if you keep putting it off, the cost just keeps rising.
That's correct.
And when I was with the fire department, we had the same discussion, and it just keeps getting passed to the next council, and to the next council. So, you know, we need to, I'm sure the public would like to see better water pressure, better streets, but it has to begin with water line replacement.
Correct. And Councilman Webb, what we're doing with these two contracts, one is just so we can come up with an idea of what a new water plant exactly is gonna cost you. That's what that report's gonna do, and that's gonna give us the ability to come up with some more solid numbers than just, you know, a price per 1,000, you know, per 1,000 gallons or per 1 million gallons a day that you produce. It gives us the opportunity to come up with something that's real, as opposed to hypothetical.
But it's still almost $500,000 to get you to do that, and I appreciate your services, but it's still a lot of money, and like Frank was talking about, if we spend $500,000 and then find out we can't do this for 20 years because it's too expensive, we've spent $500,000. And I think that's where we're maybe looking at, I know for me, like, maybe look more towards the water lines. I mean, is there possibilities to break up some of that engineering so it's not, you know, this year do $250,000 worth of engineering and figure out what those projects would be and what we could do, and then the next year, I mean, it just, I know that I wasn't able to be at whatever meetings, I know one meeting I could be at, that's the one that I knew of, in regards to some of these projects, but I think that's, I mean, there are things we need to do, but it's still a lot of money that sets us on a big path that,
Right.
you know.
Well, and like I said, there's other components inside the engineering report that's long-term looking at, that you haven't done up to this point for an alternate water source. I mean, you probably need to have a backup because, you know, it was in the mid-50s, I believe, that the river dried up for a few days or whatever, and you know, there's a little bit of concern about that. And there's been source water studies that have been done by MKEC that, you know, seem to be pretty good for addressing that. They didn't recommend doing any additional storage in this capital improvement plan. In the long term, we show money in there to do a new reservoir. Whether or not you need that, we're not proposing that at this time. We're just taking a look at where you're at right now and where you need to be, or where you should be, to have a good solid system that you can rely on. And whether you spend that money all at one time or spread it out over, you know, 10 years, 20 years, or whatever the case may be, this is just getting a start at putting your water lines in and taking a look at the cost of a treatment plant. And see what it's going to take, and then you can decide how much, you know, when you want to do it, or if you know how much money it's going to take, and how we go about doing that. But we're not asking you to spend the money for the water plant for the actual construction today. We need to be able to give you a better idea of what that's going to take, and what, you know, because it's not just building a water plant. I mean, we may be looking at a force main running back to the sewer plant. We may be looking at a waste line to the sewer plant. There's other costs that are associated with any design you come up with. And we don't want to say, well, it's going to be this, when we find out, well, we didn't do what we thought we were going to do over here with the waste. We're going to have to treat it or put it somewhere else, or build some other kind of facility to dewater it, or something like that. There's just those kind of things we need to get a good handle on, to be able to give you a good price, and that's why DEQ requires the level of detail that we're talking about in this report, because they want to make sure that we're not creating a problem by building a plant and not having thought about everything. So that's why we do this, and that's why they want to see this report, and they go through it, their engineers go through it to make sure that it's a sound plan. And so any kind of treatment that you do, that's required by DEQ. And so
are you saying that you can't engineer just water lines
yeah,
initially?
yeah, and
Right.
that's
Good.
what that second
Right.
proposal is for. Or
Everything you've got on here is simply to address the water lines.
L,
Oh.
yeah.
Item
L,
L.
item L is.
there's one item, yeah, the item L is for the priority water lines that we talked about in the workshop 2 weeks ago or so. And basically what we're doing is we're addressing about half of the critical items, in this first pass.
We've already, I believe, we already paid $300,000+ for water line project that never occurred. Right, not your fault, but, right, we've already done that.
On the CDBG? I
No.
didn't think it
No,
was
I don't think-
anything like that. Or the CDBG project that we applied for the funding for, and then, we did not get through NODA, but the engineering costs on it were nowhere near that, to my
Really?
recollection. Yeah,
What were they?
yeah. Well, I think about 120 or something like that.
It was about half of what you're saying.
Yeah, it's.
Well,
it was-
I guess the point is, we started down that road, didn't go anywhere.
Well, that is
I would
a
like
project on
something
the
more,
shelf.
for myself, I would like something presented to the council that says, here, like what you talked about, but personally, I'd like to see it. I'd like to see it in the blueprints. I'd like to see it in the drawings. I'd like to see it that, hey, we've got issues in the east part of town, and pumps, and all the things you were discussing there, and say, if we can do this, we can do this.
But that's
That's
part
in the
of
scope
what
of
this
the fee.
proposal is,
That's the proposal,
is exactly
Bill.
that, but that does cost. I mean, those are engineering costs, and what you're asking for are technical drawings that an engineer would have to do, and those costs are in the proposal here, so
You see, it bothers me. I see, understand, this is 13th Street, reconstruction, but it's just an estimate. Without any cost overrun, without any kind of fix, just a lump sum, which is more than what the money than the 2.3 million is there. So that's the kind of thing that concerns me. You guys have already pointed it out. There's some long-term commitments. Money we don't have, we can't pay for it all, so it would have to be financing. If we start doing this, we are committing the city to some long-term type stuff, and perhaps that's the only way we're going to get things fixed. But I'm not for putting it off. Again, though, I'd say you're speaking to a council that may not be sitting here next week, and I don't think this council ought to be making these decisions. Another 2 weeks, it's not gonna change a thing. It's everything has been like this for quite a long time now. So I would like to see it. My feelings are, come back in 2 weeks, make this presentation to the whatever council is sitting here, and
Can I ask, I know we gotta move on here because of our other meeting, but on the priority water lines, did you guys have any kind of estimate of what that project looked like? I mean, I know you haven't done it all, but is it a 5 million, is it a 20 million? I'm just,
It's roughly about half of what we had in the critical items, I think, so we're somewhere around 10. And that's gonna be over a 2-year period, 10 million.
And those priority lines are replacing the 4-inch and smaller lines with 6. Remind us what it is. I mean, the priority lines are the less than 4-inch and less that we would be replacing.
Right. Now, were the attachments A1 and A2?
They're in here.
Yeah, they're in there.
If
Yeah, they're back
you look
there.
at the attachments at the back of our contract, we show what lines we're replacing. I don't know if you've got that. I've got some
Yeah.
with me.
It's
if
in
you
the
don't.
drop, it's in the drop box.
It
Okay.
is, yeah, they received those.
But it shows exactly what lines we're replacing. On attachment A, that shows where we're replacing the line from the water plant to the tower. There's also a 12-inch line from the water plant south on First Street down to Coolidge. There's another 12-inch line that's on First Street that goes just south of Doolin, a block south of Doolin, and goes south of Block. And then I believe it goes east, it goes west to, I want to say 3rd Street or 4th Street, some thereabouts. But the proposal does show the lines we're talking about. They're not, we've already determined what ones we're doing. And if you look at the attachment A2, there's lines on there that are red. Those are the ones that we're proposing to do. The ones that are dashed, red dashed, those are ones that we've already done the design for. So we're just going to take those plans and wrap them up into another package with the ones that are solid red. And we're going to have to design the ones in the solid red and put those together. And we've got it separated so the top portion you see is going to be the first bid package. The lower one is another bid package. And the reason we're doing that is we're trying to keep them small enough that we can get some smaller contractors in that can bond this, so we've got more competition.
Hey,
And
I'm sorry, sir, I never saw any of this, so I'm kind of in the dark on it.
do you have those in front of you? I've got copies of
Yes,
this.
I do, but
Phil, was this not what we went over at our meeting? And I know that we hit the high points of it, but we did go through the process of
Right.
explaining what this was, and we did get this out to everybody so they could look at. So that information is there, but again, you don't have to approve it tonight, but we do at least need to discuss it. And that is what this meeting is for discussion of this topic, and many, many others. And it is 6 o'clock, so.
Yep. All right, we're gonna. Okay. All right, we're gonna end this work session.